and you want to see whether it's working, whether it works in the lives of people who follow that path. And, you can look at someone, in the path that I have followed, for example, which is the path taught by Dr. George King. And I've followed it for over 50 years now, as a student first, and then I've been full-time working for it for 45 years. I absolutely know it works. And I know it leads exactly where we're told it will lead, which is choose well, stand fast, know God.
The Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence, where politics is not the answer, materialism counts for nothing, and spirituality will set you free.
Hi, Richard.
Hey, Darren.
So I've got one that really stood out to me today that I wanted to raise with you, and I think there's quite a lot of good points that we can go through here. So this is really about the pitfalls of fake spirituality.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I think that a lot of people do struggle with understanding like what true spirituality even looks and feels like, especially when you're new to the path and you're looking around.
I'm not surprised.
Especially with, the glut of so-called New Age, all these online, which is marketed really aggressively, and is very self-focused. So at the heart of this essentially is a question about not only how do you tell a true path from a false one, but also how do you avoid falling into some of the pitfalls of a false path yourself? Yeah,
it's I really feel for people in that boat, and I've met some, and they've wasted a lot of time. Sometimes they've wasted years going down a wrong path, and they're quite sincere about it. I think there are many ways, but I mean, one of the things is to look at the results, or even the claimed results, because sometimes they don't claim a lot of results other than for you, the individual. But certainly, if it's a path, and this is in the light of the 9 freedoms, which is our bedrock here on the Spiritual Freedom Show, if it's about you having a better life, you feeling better. I mean, some of it isn't spiritual at all, actually. It's kind of using spiritual methodology to improve your material life or your emotional life. And that's not a spiritual thing per se. But the hallmark, the key word, we always come back to it, the third freedom, is service. And I think it puts people off, because there's a lot of people out there saying, look, what was I put on earth to do? What is my life purpose? If you like, what is my mission in life? And for many that I've come across, they never find it, or they think they've never found it. And frankly, some of them give up quite readily because they get distracted by not what am I on earth to do, but what do I actually want to do? What makes me happy? What do I like? Which is a totally different question. You have to divorce that. I've got this theory that, of all the Beethoven, or take a Beethoven, that there could be 100 other people at the time who, had they motivated themselves, had the musical ability to actually become a Beethoven as well, but just didn't either bother, got distracted by other things in their life, didn't have the drive, the determination to become a musical genius. I'm not saying everybody could do it, or that even most people could do it, but I think there are others who could have done it, who just didn't have the get up and go, the fire in their belly, and what Beethoven would call his love of God, to do it. So I'm sorry to say, coming back to the question, it's a very good question. It is a bit of a labor of love. You've got to really get into it. You've got to use every faculty to sort the wheat from the chaff. And I'd apply that to us here, to the 9 freedoms here. You look into it, don't take our word for it. But in the end, is it just about self, or is it about helping humanity? Because if it's just about self, it's not a really great New Age path.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like the core of the whole thing, the real yardstick.
It's actually not a New Age path, I should have said, at all.
Yes, the true New Age. Yeah, I think that's a great yardstick overall. I thought I'd share a couple other ideas you might want to comment on here that people have suggested about what a false path might look like and how we might therefore compare that to a true path. They were saying, okay, a false path would be one where it says you don't need to change because we're saved by just belonging to the right religion or accepting a savior to cancel our sins, so we can do whatever we want. I think it's quite.
Of course they're going to try and tempt people with nice promises, and they're. I think I don't wish to sound patronizing here, but a lot of it can be done with just basic common sense and intelligence, as a matter of fact.
As in terms of our discrimination?
Yeah. Some of it's quite easy to see. I mean, you can look at the person who's making the claim. And if you take, say, Dr. George King, who's at the center of our teachings, the 9 freedoms and other teachings, you can look at him. I mean, we've got the biography out there, The King Who Came to Earth. You can check it out. You can see what he did with his life and whether or not that's authentic, and whether or not I think even his biggest critics would say he practiced what he preached. Sure. There are some people out there making claims who simply, quite obviously, aren't capable of these abilities. What is their training to make such pronouncements? Yeah. What have they demonstrated? And of course, it comes back also, what is the caliber of the teaching? Does it stack up to your logic? Yeah. I mean, your main guide on this is going to be your intuition. But saying that, I do realize most people, when they're searching, don't have a trained intuition yet. Yes. Yeah. And so, they're going to have to fall back, always use logic and common sense. Yeah,
totally. I think that's a great one there. There's a couple other points here I thought I'd put your way. So things like it offers us the promise of something for nothing and control of our circumstances. I think any path that's basically saying that you can get everything for nothing, or promising you ease, or promising that you don't need to change, like the point I was just making. Yeah. I mean, that's obviously to your point about using logic, that's obviously not what spirituality is really about.
Any path that's going to take you from where you are, where I am, or certainly when I found this path, to enlightenment is not going to be easy.
Right.
Obviously, that's again, I think, common sense, really.
Just looking at how you are in the first place.
And if someone's telling you it's easy, you can rule them out. They obviously don't. They might even believe it, which means they're not enlightened themselves.
Right.
They can't be. Yeah. You're going to gain, and we've mentioned this before, it's a particular thing that it's in the 9 freedoms, and it's something that we talk about on this show quite a bit. Yeah. You're going to have experiences along the way. They're not all going to be difficult, so don't get me wrong here. You're going to have wonderful experiences, and you're going to have elevating experiences, and you're going to have moments when or let me say, there will come a time when but even prior to that, when you have such strong experiences that you feel that are real, and they're real, you can say that much, that that's a yardstick then for you. And in fact, in the old yoga past, they used to say it's one of the reasons people had some of these psychic experiences along the way, to give them encouragement, to give them hope, to make them see this as a real thing. This isn't just somebody's theory. Yeah. But another tip I would give to people who are on the search is, don't give up. Don't be put off by the nonsense. I mean, I actually think, and people could criticize me for saying this, I don't really mind if they do, there's more nonsense out there than truth. I mean, I go to some of these New Age festivals, to speak or to whatever, and it's amazing how much nonsense is out there. Now, I'm going to say I'm not saying everybody there is making it up, or is a con man or woman. No, I mean, they probably believe it. Many of them, probably most of them, because there isn't a lot of money to be made generally. Sometimes there is in fake organizations, but generally there isn't. But it's amazing how little truth there is there. But to take the pressure off you as someone who's searching to find the real path, I'd say this: you're not obligated to decide today. You don't have to look at something and say, yes, I believe that, and I don't believe this. You can keep an open mind. You can weigh it up. And I don't mean by that you just put it on the shelf and hope somehow you'll know. Now, you've got to make an effort to find the truth. You've got to knock on the door so that it can be opened. And, in time, you'll get your proof, one way or the other. But don't feel you've got to rush to a judgment. It's not a leap of faith. That's actually, in my view, a nonsense thing, a leap of faith as a concept. It implies a sort of a risk. You don't have to take a risk. You can test something out. You can test it for a long period, but you need to test it. You need to try it. And also, I'll say another thing, and this is actually in the 4th freedom. You don't want to go, as I think it says, chewing here, chewing there, I think is the same.
Yes, yeah.
Because if you do, you'll never get anywhere. When you do find something that is truth, which you feel that, okay, this is the path I am meant to be on, then you need to actually go for it and not keep looking around at other things as well, unless you come across a greater one. Yeah. If it doesn't hit the spot, you might, I mean, there are things out there, let's be fair here, which are very good, but really aren't enough, in my view. So by that I mean you could find a good yoga path, which is perfectly genuine, which can help you with your health, which can help you with finding some degree of inner peace. There won't be full enlightenment in this case, let's just say a degree of inner peace. And, that's a good thing, but for me it wouldn't be nearly enough. It's not nearly enough. So, you've got to say, look, it does come back to my point there. What am I put on earth to do? And sometimes, by the way, it won't be what you initially want to do. Even Dr. King said that, actually. When he was called to serve, part of him, actually, that wasn't what he wanted. He'd rather be doing Jnana yoga and Raja yoga at that time. But he was put on earth, he came from another world, he had a mission, a great mission, and of course he fulfilled it with every ounce of his being, every second of every day. I witnessed it. And even his biggest critic wouldn't criticize him. They would say he did practice what he preached. And you're looking for that too, in a spiritual teacher.
No, I think it's great points you're making there, especially about it not being enough, because I was actually in that exact position myself, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago or so, where I was looking at another yoga organization and looking at the Aetherius Society, and ultimately I just felt like, wait a minute, like this is actually so obvious what I should do and what my heart feels like I need to do. I mean, in comparison, the Aetherius Society completely dedicated not just to service, but to service on a global scale, and this other path was more about a personal yogic path, and I was like, as much as that appeals to me in a way, it's just, but that's not, I just know, coming to your point, I just know that's not what I'm meant to do. And, in the beginning I did feel a bit confused and torn, but then it gradually, as you say, as I spent more time on it, spent more for it, it became more and more obvious what the right choice was. And I think that's meant, I say that, I think, meaning to give encouragement and inspiration to other people who are also maybe at the beginning of their path and looking for the way forward. Maybe they don't necessarily feel like they know it yet, but as you say, when you spend time on, you keep an open mind, you spend time doing the practices or reading them or actually doing what they invite you to do, then it's like the answer starts to grow within you. And your intuition awakens and the path becomes clear.
Indeed, and it is a lot simpler than it might seem, because really what you're looking for is, how can I do the most good on this planet? Which we're all on. How can I make the biggest contribution? And you'll find, there you'll have some organizations, of which there are quite a few, that aren't fake, but aren't even claiming to make a massive contribution to humanity. They're making some contribution. They're putting forward some philosophy or doing healing, all of which is very good, it's great, but it's not enough, as far as I'm concerned, to dedicate my life to. And this is, and when you find something that is genuine. Now, I don't know of any genuine organization, which means an organization I actually believe is genuine, which makes a bigger claim than the Aetherius Society makes. So, the claim of the Aetherius Society is massive. To be working directly now with cosmic intelligence is basically to save the planet, in a nutshell. And that's, more worthwhile thing to be part of than any other form of service I actually know of. There's many forms, including fantastic material service in the health field, in other fields, of course, very good. But a lot of people, they want to serve, but they also want to serve in a way that fits in with their own interests, their own And it's understandable, their own inclinations. You know, I'm interested in health, or I'm interested in mental health, or I'm interested in, you know, ecology, or whatever it might be. That of itself is not a good enough reason to do it. It's a fine thing, but that of itself isn't enough. It's really down to what can I do which will make the biggest difference in the world. Whether it's actually what interests me at the moment most or not. And if you can do that, then of course you're moving beyond, in a way, lower mind in the direction of higher mind and ultimately beyond.
Yeah, and I think this is another great point. I think I put in the same category, sort of having the clarity of that vision in terms of what you want to do, and also of your mission, to see beyond anything that might sort of, I don't know, distract you or kind of put you off because it's not quite your thing, or you know, it's, you know, you have some sort of bias or hang up about it. You can kind of miss the big picture, if you know what I mean, when you're looking at an organization, and miss what it's really about just because of some other smaller issue. Okay, maybe the way that they their devotional or ceremonial
of course, and there might be things you just don't like.
Things you don't like or things you don't get, and it's sort of like, oh, I don't want that. But actually, the truth was right there in front of you if you had the clarity of vision and mission to see it.
And people will be, in my view, very small-minded often, and say something like, well, that sounds a bit far out. They're right, it does sound a bit far out. Is that good? Is that bad? You know, it's irrelevant, actually. It's all that matters is, could it be true? Let's just start with that. Now, if you find out through your own experience that it isn't true, because the person making the claim actually didn't do what they said they do, didn't have the training they said they had, etc., or in many other ways, fine, leave it. And you know, the other thing is, if this is again may give some comfort to the questioner.
Sure.
If you search and you test an organization, and for karmic reasons, you're taken down a blind alley by some fake organization, but you're testing it, you're trying to find out if it's true, you will, although it might look like a completely futile exercise, be manipulating your own karma, and you will deserve to find the truth because you've tried this.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it is an exercise, and it's a difficult thing. I have some sympathy, and a lot of people just give up and never become Beethoven.
Gosh, that's. I think that's a really interesting point you've made there about, you know, if you've really made the effort to find the truth, even if you've gone down the wrong path, that karmically you deserve to find the truth.
Yeah, you've got to knock on the door, and it shall be opened unto you. That's a great promise.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think there's some other kind of things. If you know, we change gears a little bit here and think about some of the personal pitfalls that people could easily fall into. I think on the spiritual path. You know, one comment that someone made here was about toxic positivity. You know, kind of forcefully, kind of like a forceful optimism. You know, where you know, even though the path really
interesting.
Can be
I've never heard that phrase, toxic positivity. It's a shame, isn't it?
But it's like
it's not real. It's
not real. It's not
real.
And sort of you know, we know that the path can be tumultuous and testing. Like you said, anything that's going to really take you to enlightenment, it's got to be this crucible of transformation, hasn't it? And there's going to be ups and downs, and it's not always going to be.
Indeed. And what would it be worth if there weren't tests on any path? You know, on any accomplishment. As a matter of fact, there are tests, and that's the thing. But I want to balance that by saying there are absolutely wonderful, elevated confirmations of the path and experiences, and eventually you can know. You can get to the point where you know it's no longer even about whether you believe or even what you experience or feel. You actually know, okay, this is true. That will eventually happen. But in terms of the forceful, toxic positivity, which is like fake positivity, I suppose, might even be lying to yourself. I don't quite know what they're referring to there, but this isn't a path of force in this day and age. I would say this: have focus, not force. There's a little one.
Yeah. That's kind of the essence of service being the way, isn't it? Because you're no longer forcing Kundalini.
You're not forcing it. It will rise, but you've still got to focus. It isn't just going to happen one day, or why aren't I enlightened yet? You've got to predetermine it. That's also in the fourth freedom. You've got to set out to become enlightened, and you've got to set out to know the truth about these organizations, and you will get the answer if you go for it. You won't get it if you just peruse around here and there and look at something else. You'll never get past first base.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the most inspiring quotes for me in the Nine Freedoms about making it happen, that you have to make it happen. You
absolutely do. That's for sure. And a lot of people don't, I think. A lot of people think, well, one day maybe I'll be more enlightened. And it will gradually happen, but to get to the higher states, you've got to induce them and bring them into being.
Yeah.
But your way of doing that is through service. And the greater the service, the better. And, there are many ways to serve. That's stated in the third freedom.
Yeah.
And you have to choose which way, you're going to serve. Spiritual service, some people say, what about material service? Is that as good as spiritual service? It's essential. It's an essential aspect of living on this physical plane that we're on. But more people will do that.
Yeah.
There are not many people who are willing to give spiritual service. They will try and practice spiritual development for their own good or to improve their life or something like that, which is different. But to give spiritual service is a very rare thing. The people who do it are the glorious few, and they're regarded as the glorious few by the great ones, and they're taken to the hearts of the great ones.
Yeah, that's telling and inspiring, isn't it? Another thought here, see what you think of this one. Having spirituality as a social identity instead of a way of actually living your life.
Gosh, this is a thinking person, isn't it? As a social identity, it's kind of a way of...
It's kind of like what you said, because if you just had it as an identity, you wouldn't actually really be making the effort. You wouldn't really have that degree of determination that we're talking about. You would just sort of...
It sounds so foreign to me, that idea.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
I must admit, there's one thing I don't know whether this is relevant, but that I do like about the internet. There's one thing I do like, which is that when you meet people socially, I don't think this is what the question is asking, but when you meet them, they can quickly find out who you are, if certainly in my case, and if they don't like it, and I don't know of anyone who's done that and looked me up and said they don't like it, but if they don't, then they won't bother to socialize with you. And as far as I'm concerned, that's great. Because I don't want to waste time with people who don't really know what I really believe. At the same time, socially, I don't want to thrust it down anybody's throat either. And, it's up to them if they're interested or not. But I don't want to hide it. So in that regard, I suppose having a social identity, but I don't think that's what the question.
But it's interesting because that's kind of the opposite, which is that it is so who you are that the identity thing is an aside because it's just an expression of how you devote your life. I think that's kind of the point here.
There are people who kind of do the other thing, which is hide their spiritual existence socially.
Which is probably another pitfall as well. Actually.
It could be. I mean, it's a personal choice, but the downside of that is that the relationships you have, if people really don't know this very, very important part of your being, then they aren't really befriending you. They're befriending a part of you, not the whole of you. So what's it really worth if it's if it's just a social thing, if it's, I'm not saying you've got to go around always mentioning it, or if they're just an acquaintance or something like that. But if they're someone who matters in your life, and you hide it from them. And I've come across people whose married partner didn't know some of the beliefs and experiences of themselves. I think it's not a great relationship at that point. If spirituality is important to you, again, they don't have to agree with you. And I'm not saying you can't be married or with someone who doesn't have your beliefs. You can. I know many people who are. But I mean, at least they know what you do, even if they don't actually want to do it themselves. That's all I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Actually, I've definitely experienced that in my own life, and even my friends here, even work colleagues. If I've said little things and they've actually asked me about it, I've just told them. And the next day they were still there, and they were still great friends. And I was like, you know what, great.
And sometimes they might not be. I mean,
if they weren't fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I'd go through one or two more here. This next one is about kind of hypocrisy. Maybe you go to church wherever you go, and yet you're not actually living any of the values in your life.
Yeah, well, I think that's an acid test, really. Yeah. I mean, if you take us as an example, our whole ethos is service to the world, service to humanity. Obviously one should look after people close to one, but our main ethos is serving people we don't even know, that you might be in another country and we're sending energy out to them. If you want to test that, you want to look and see how active a person is. I mean, how much time are they spending doing that? Are they doing that? Are they doing the thing they are teaching you to do? In their life, and how long have they done it for, and what is their, because so many people don't stand fast, and this is another thing, it's an offshoot from this question, but they choose it. Let's say they do find the path, they will leave it, or go off on a tangent, and then they won't benefit from it, and sometimes they'll be honest enough to come back again, which does take some humility. Actually, hasn't happened to me personally, but I know people who have done this, and I take my hat off to them, because they're not only are they coming back, they're also implicitly really saying, I was wrong about this, and that's fair enough, and that's quite notable, actually, and noble, I should say. But I think you are looking absolutely to see if people practice what they preach. What you can't do really is say, well, that person, I'm trying to think of a good example here, isn't doing what I think is spiritual in their life, whatever it is, therefore their path isn't good. I mean, you're looking to see whether they practice what they preach.
I see,
as it were.
Not what you,
if you're in, for example, a lot of Christian churches are very, very occupied with personal morality, personal relationships, issues of sexuality, gender, and so on. We aren't, in the Aetherius Society, occupied with that much at all. I mean, our concern is service to humanity. But if a person was preaching about wedlock or preaching about some of those issues, and they weren't living it, they're plainly a hypocrite. Doesn't mean that the things they said from the platform were wrong, but they aren't living it, so they wouldn't be someone to go to be taught about that. Whereas, again, as I say, it does depend what that teacher is putting forth, very much so. Obviously, if you don't agree with them, then you've got to examine yourself and look into it and see what conclusions you come to, and you might think they're wrong and it's not a good path. That's a decision you have to make.
So I think then, just like coming around full circle, the key thing that we've really talked about in terms of looking at true spirituality, you've highlighted that service is at the very heart of it. And I think the other thing I would say is avoiding the pitfalls personally is really about sort of realizing that a spiritual path is essentially this crucible of change and transformation that is ultimately taking you towards true enlightenment. And that's not, and in order to do that, it's not one where the toxic positivity is going to help you. It's not one where hypocrisy is going to help you. It's not one where a lack of discrimination is going to help you. All of these things about being able to perceive, not only to see a true path, but as you say, stand fast is going to be essential too.
It's essential to stand fast, and you want to see whether it's working, whether it works in the lives of people who follow that path. And, you can look at someone, in the path that I have followed, for example, which is the path taught by Dr. George King, and I've followed it for over 50 years now, as a student first, and then I've been full-time working for it for 45 years. I absolutely know it works. And I know it leads exactly where we're told it will lead, which is choose well, stand fast, know God.
Perfect. Thank you.
Everybody's Darren here. Thanks for tuning into the show. Now, if you enjoyed that episode, don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom from the 9 Freedoms. If you'd like to find out more about the 9 Freedoms, about Mars Sector 6 by Dr. George King, go to our website, that's aetherius.org. Richard and I love hearing from you, receiving your comments, your questions on your spiritual experiences, and talking about them on the show. So do write to us, share them with us at spiritualfreedom@richardlawrence.co.uk. Always remember that service is the jewel in the rock of attainment. See you next time.